For more than 70 years, something has been seen in our skies, tracked on radar, captured on infrared, intercepted by fighter jets traveling faster than sound. Objects that accelerate without propulsion, craft that outmaneuver trained combat pilots, vehicles that descend from 80,000 feet to sea level in seconds. Governments once laughed, then they classified, then they admitted quietly that something remains unidentified. And yet, even now, even after official acknowledgements, congressional hearings, Pentagon task force, we are left with a deeper question. Not simply, are they real? But what exactly is being disclosed? Disclosure implies something specific, a secret, a file, a vault, a hidden object waiting to be revealed. But what if the difficulty of disclosure is not merely political? What if the problem runs deeper than secrecy? What if the phenomenon itself resists stable explanation? In this series, we examine not whether UAP exists, but why full disclosure, if it even exists at all, seems structurally impossible.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility, unless there's this enormous conspiracy, and they hid it from the President of the United States.
I think there's this assumption that presidents can walk in the Oval Office on day one and say, all right, take me to Roswell, show me the alien bodies. I want to see the video of the autopsy. I want to see the whole thing, open it up. I think that really is a naive understanding of how our government works.
This is not a story about aliens. It is a story about institutions, about belief, about the limits of knowledge, and about a possibility that challenges the foundation of modern reality itself. Now let us begin with the most straightforward explanation, because the simplest version of the disclosure problem is political. The claim is familiar. Non-human craft have been recovered. Advanced materials have been studied. A legacy program exists, compartmentalized, insulated, and hidden within the architecture of national security. According to this hypothesis, the truth is known, but controlled. If that is correct, then the disclosure problem is not metaphysical. It is bureaucratic. It is about power. It is about who gets to decide what the public is allowed to know. History provides precedent. During World War II, the United States developed the atomic bomb in near total secrecy. Over 100,000 people were involved in the Manhattan Project. Yet, for years, the public remained unaware. During the Cold War, entire aircraft programs were hidden from view. Intelligence agencies conducted covert operations across continents. Surveillance systems monitored communications at global scale.
In the weeks following 9/11, the Bush administration started a vast, secretive, and controversial surveillance program that let the National Security Agency monitor who Americans were talking to by phone and email. If anyone on the line was suspected of terrorism, the government could listen to the actual phone calls or read the emails. This surveillance continued under the Patriot Act, now with the approval of Congress. How did the government justify collecting all this data? They argued that fighting terrorism is like finding a needle in a haystack, and you need the entire haystack to find that needle.
Governments can keep secrets, especially when national security is invoked, especially when information is compartmentalized, especially when only a small number of individuals see the full picture. The legacy program hypothesis argues that something similar happened with UAP, perhaps since the late 1940s, perhaps after a crash, perhaps multiple crashes. Recovered materials are allegedly transferred into special access programs. These programs are nested within larger black budget structures. Research is outsourced to private aerospace contractors. If a non-human propulsion system exists, it would represent the greatest strategic advantage in history. No government would disclose that casually. No military would relinquish that edge willingly. Under this model, the reason for secrecy is rational. It is not cosmic mystery. It is geopolitical competition. But here is where the problem begins to widen. Secrecy at scale is difficult. Secrecy across generations is exponentially harder. The Manhattan Project, though classified, was eventually revealed. Cold War programs have since been declassified. Intelligence abuses have surfaced through investigations, journalism, and whistleblowers. Large programs leave traces. Budgets create paper trails. Personnel retire. Political administrations change. Oversight committees shift. The longer a secret persists, the more unstable it becomes. A crash retrieval program lasting 70 years or more would be unprecedented in its durability. But is it possible? Yes, but stable forever? That is harder to defend.
I don't think I can get her to do it.
You mean it'll be difficult?
Very.
Well, this is not mission difficult, Mr. Hunt. It's mission impossible. Difficult should be a walk in the park for you.
The involvement of private aerospace contractors complicates the picture. By transferring materials into corporate possession, governments reduce transparency obligations. Freedom of information requests lose leverage. Congressional oversight becomes more difficult when programs are buried within proprietary structures. Corporate entities are not subject to the same disclosure standards as public agencies. Compartmentalizations becomes more granular. Plausible deniability increases. But corporations also have supply chains. They have subcontractors. They have auditors. They have employee turnover. They have rivalries, and human beings talk. Even the most secure systems leak over time. This does not mean that the legacy program hypothesis is false. It means that if it is true, it represents a historically unique achievement in secrecy. It would require extraordinary discipline across decades. It would require cross-administration continuity. It would require sustained suppression of documentation. And it would require that the secret remains strategically valuable enough to justify the risk of exposure. Now, consider the modern era. We live in an age of distributed information, encrypted messaging, anonymous digital publication, leaked archives, whistleblower protections. The larger the secret, the harder it becomes to contain. Yet, despite this, something curious has occurred. Governments have admitted that UAP exists, but stopped short of confirming origin. Military pilots have described encounters, but without resolution. Reports acknowledge anomalous performance, but decline explanation. This is not total denial, nor is it full disclosure. It is something in between.
Okay. Are you read into secret UAP crash retrieval programs?
We would have to have a conversation in a closed session, ma'am. I signed documentation 3 years ago that restricts my ability to discuss specifically crash retrievals. I submitted for my book through the DOPSR process, which took a year for it to be reviewed. And what is in the book is what I was told I'm allowed to talk about.
Has the government conducted secret UAP crash retrieval programs, yes or no?
Yes,
Okay. Were they designed to identify and reverse engineer alien craft, yes or no?
yes.
Do any U.S. contractors have the same?
I would prefer to address that in a closed session, ma'am.
Has the U.S. government become aware of actual evidence of extraterrestrial, otherwise unexplained forms of intelligence? And if so, when do you think this first occurred?
I like to use the term non-human. I don't like to denote origin. Keeps the aperture open, both scientifically.
Right.
Certainly, like I've discussed publicly previously, 1930s.
Okay. Can you give me the names and titles of the people with direct firsthand knowledge and access to some of this crash retrieval, some of these crash retrieval programs, and maybe which facilities, military bases the recovered material would be in? And I know a lot of Congress talked about we're going to go to Area 51, and and there's nothing there anymore anyway. It's just and we move like a glacier. And as soon as we announce it, I'm sure the moving vans would pull up. But please.
I can't discuss that publicly, but I did provide that information both to the Intel committees and the Inspector General.
And we could get that in the SCIF if we were allowed to get in a SCIF with you. Would that be probably what you would think?
Sure, if you had the appropriate accesses, yeah.
What special access programs cover this information, and how is it possible that they have evaded oversight for so long?
I do know the names. Once again, I can't discuss that publicly and how they've evaded oversight. In a closed setting, I can tell you the specific tradecraft used.
All right.
And that is what complicates the purely political explanation. Because if the goal were simply concealment, why acknowledge anything at all? Why confirm anomalous flight characteristics? Why release infrared footage? Why hold public hearings? A complete blackout would be simpler. Instead, we observe partial transparency, controlled acknowledgement, incremental admission. The secrecy hypothesis explains suppression. It does not fully explain managed ambiguity. If a craft exists in a hangar somewhere, reverse engineered and catalogued, then disclosure would ultimately be a documentation problem. A vault door opens, photographs are released, materials are examined. The story ends with confirmation.
I want to prepare you for what you're about to see, Mr. Mulder.
Faraday cage? For what?
Do you know what an ARV is?
But that is not what we see. Instead, the phenomenon behaves in a way that resists stabilization. Reports are compelling, but incomplete. Data is suggestive, but not decisive. Witnesses are credible, but limited. Ambiguity persists. And so we must ask, is the problem solely that information is being withheld? Or is it that the information itself is unstable? Secrecy explains why we do not know. It does not explain why the phenomenon itself behaves the way it does. Objects that accelerate without visible propulsion, craft that appear on radar but behave impossibly, encounters that blend physical trace with psychological anomaly. These features complicate the idea that we are merely dealing with hidden hardware. If this was simply about recovered vehicles, we would expect the primary tension to be political. Instead, the tension feels epistemic. The issue is not only who knows, it is what can be known And that is where the disclosure problem deepens. Because if we move beyond politics, we encounter something far stranger, something that cannot be solved with declassification alone. The secrecy hypothesis assumes that the truth is stable, that it exists in physical form, that it sits somewhere waiting. But what if the truth is not stable? What if the phenomenon itself adapts? What if the difficulty is not merely that information is hidden, but that reality is more complex than our institutions are designed to handle? In part 2, we move beyond the hangar, beyond the vault, beyond the classified documents, and into a pattern that stretches back centuries, a pattern that suggests the problem of disclosure may not be political at all. It may be structural.